I think it can be really empowering just to understand that you can say no and can set boundaries for yourself.
Before we get into it, I'd like to respectfully acknowledge that this video series was filmed on the stolen lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Greater Kulin Nation. Just a heads up, the following video series contains content that may be distressing for some. Welcome back to Getting Into It. My name is Dr. Lena Molnar. I'm a gender-based violence expert.
My name is Hetty McCalla. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm a sexual and reproductive health promotion expert. What are we talking about in today's video?
In this video, we're going to be talking about how sexual pleasure can be empowering for women and gender diverse people with disabilities. Could you tell me what your thoughts are about that?
Accessing pleasure and safe and respectful relationships is a human right. It can help people advocate for what they need. It can help them access supports and services to make their sexual and reproductive health more equitable and pleasurable.
So what can happen when a human rights model is not applied in conversations regarding sexual health for women and gender diverse folk with disabilities?
In that case, that you can get a lot of your own personal biases and prejudices and shame and stigma that surround sex and sexuality entering the conversation, and it can really prevent people from being able to access healthy and pleasurable relationships. Even just in something like sexual education, for instance, it can be very heterosexual, cisgendered and able-bodied focused, and it can really exclude people from seeing themselves represented in the right to pleasure. And when you don't see yourself represented that way and you don't realize you aren't taught that you have this right, it becomes a lot harder to advocate for those rights that you have.
Not being able to talk to a practitioner about sex or sexuality or sexual practice, it limits your ability to have positive experiences and limits your ability to have safe experiences. Also diminishes your humanity in a way that other people get to enjoy.
A lot of the time, I don't think medical practitioners even consider the fact that disabled people have sex. They don't even consider consent. It's not something I've ever been talked about by my doctor. So I don't know. I think that'll be really important for doctors to be able to share resources on what consent is. I don't think a lot of people understand what consent is, because a lot of times you consent to things you don't actually want to consent to, but that's because you feel like you don't have a choice. And that's both with medical practitioners or with partners or anything really.
It's expected that you just trust these strangers, but I think it's really difficult, especially when, they are still a part of society and society holds these certain beliefs and that make it really difficult to talk about these sort of things.
What happens with regards to my health when I'm having sex, and what can I anticipate?
Yeah.
And how can I have a conversation about that? And so as a practitioner, you might want to talk about what has happened before. Mm-hmm. Did you enjoy that? Mm-hmm. Did you not enjoy that? Mm. How can we workshop that together so that you can have a conversation with your partner or your future partners about having a better time in a consensual way?
There's a lot of benefits, not just for people with disabilities, but for all of us to be talking about sex before we have it.
Yeah, so it could have made a really big difference if a long time ago, like before my 40s, that someone had have given me these resources that allowed me to explore things in a safe way. Most things in my life, for example, lead to pain. Any kind of exertion or lots of different things. Staying in one position too long causes pain. So there's a balance between putting up with it and changing what you're doing. So that's a skill that you've got to learn over time.
So autistic people and disabled people, especially women with intellectual disabilities, are a lot more at risk of being targets of sexual assault and abuse. And that's often because we don't actually recognise these situations when we're in them. And that's not purely an autistic thing, but it is an often autistic experience. And when you've just always been treated horribly your whole life, you don't really question when you're treated horribly again, which can have huge impacts on your mental health, how you feel about your body and your place in the world. And of course, when people do things without your consent, it's devastating, whether that's a doctor, whether that's a random person, whether it's a partner or someone you supposedly love. Not having consent is really catastrophic, and I don't think people really recognise that. if medical practitioners are mindful of consent and showing that consent, it's also a really good example for people to accept that in their own lives and think, hey, no matter what, consent is important. Doesn't matter if it's a doctor, medical professional, a random person, or a partner.
People hear consent and assume sex, but I think it can fall out into many different areas of your life, even just day-to-day activities. I think it can be really empowering just to understand that you can say no and can set boundaries for yourself.
When we have discussions about sex before we have sex, it can actually be a great opportunity for us to really examine what we actually want from sex, from our partners, from ourselves in the moment. And it can really help counteract some of the sexual scripting that we have around us. And by sexual scripting, I mean that there are societal rules and unwritten rules all around us that tell us how we are expected to behave and act, how we're expected to desire, and even who are we meant to be attracted to.
Learning about what pleasures yourself first is really important. So practitioners talking to their clients about self-pleasure is really important, because then they know which bits feel good and what feels good. And then they can tell their partners. And I guess the practicing of talking about it, it's like a muscle, like you've got to keep doing it.
If anything you have heard in this video has brought up distressing feelings, please call 1-800-RESPECT. For more information or other resources, feel free to visit the Women with Disabilities Victoria website at wdv.org.au.